2019 was a year of conflict in the games industry and community. We witnessed the start of a war for the very heart of PC gaming as fiery Steam fanboys fought tooth and nail against clicking a different icon on their desktop, and developers bore the brunt of accepting financial support from Epic to help create their games. I personally don't care what launcher my games launch from as long as they launch and they're good, but what do I know? Maybe Steam users just get off on putting more money into Gabe Newell's bank account. The games industry is also reaching a place where the film industry was in the 40s and 50s, when growing workplace mismanagement and abuses pushed workers to form labor movements that led to film crews and actors unionizing. We're seeing organizations like Game Workers Unite receive a huge groundswell of support around the globe, and official trade unions being established, most notably Game Workers Unite UK.
You gain a group of people at your back
who are like-minded
and will help stand up for you and your ability to work safe, healthy hours, but be able to switch off and go home in the evening and not be looked down on for that decision.
We could get a really great, really diverse, really healthy industry out of it.
All of this will continue into 2020 as big money disrupts the PC game marketplace from companies like Epic, and union-busting efforts from companies like EA and Activision will push a deeper division into the heart of the games industry and community. But while all this is happening, studios are still making games. And a lot of the ones made by indie studios are actually worth playing. I played about 50 games released in 2019, a lot of them that didn't come in boxes, and I wanted to highlight for you my 10 favorites. Enjoy.
Number 10. If you put Super Metroid for the first time in front of anyone who's played a platformer or Metroidvania developed with more modern design sensibilities, like Guacamelee or Hollow Knight, most won't enjoy it. But what Super Metroid and the nostalgia it carries for so many people represents is the isolating feeling of exploration, the gradual powering up of one's abilities, and the tense boss fights won with a sliver of health remaining, barely achieving victory after failing so many times before. All of that is captured in Gato Roboto, and it actually feels good to play. You're a cat. You've crashed your captain's ship by sitting on his keyboard, and now you've got to suit up and save the day. Dive into the beautiful monochromatic laboratory on which you've crashed, explore the winding corridors one platform at a time. Gato Roboto doesn't fuss around. You know exactly what you're doing from the get-go, and it delivers a tight, platforming experience, great little boss fights, and a hilarious script I think anyone can appreciate. Platforming sections are mixed up by forcing players to exit their cat mech suit to progress in certain areas, and here you're incredibly underpowered. The game becomes more of a bullet hell. It's tight, it's a cheap game, and it's well worth your time, especially if you love speedrunning or finding every collectible in the world's many nooks and crannies. Number 9.
But we hope that you won't get discouraged.
You don't really understand what you do in Superliminal until you see it in action. By moving objects around a space from a first-person perspective, you change the size of those objects relative to where you move them from. This is the core mechanic you'll use to solve increasingly bizarre, brain-busting, and sometimes quite humorous puzzles throughout the game's 2 to 3 hour runtime. I beat Superliminal in one sitting, and in an industry increasingly valuing quantity over quality when it comes to what you're doing moment to moment, one of my favorite things a game can do is present an interesting premise, mechanism, or style, in this case all three, and then deploy it in a game that doesn't drag on for 50 fucking hours just to justify its price of admission. Superliminal is interesting, it's deliberately designed not to waste my time, and it gets in and gets out before it can become too boring. Bravo.
Number 8.
I forgave this game's abysmal performance on my Xbox One because of how much I enjoyed playing it. I sat through minute-long load times, a stuttering frame rate, and a few crashes because this game is fucking rad. And I've seen how it's supposed to look on PC. I love just floating around the Bureau of Control, discovering each of this game's amazing side missions, collecting and reading redacted company files, and mowing down the game's antagonist called the Hiss, with Control's exceptional third-person combat. I've never seen Twin Peaks, the television series everyone keeps comparing this game to, but I think I'd enjoy it if the story is nearly half as engaging as Control's psychedelic, fourth-wall-breaking adventure through the pseudo-FBI headquarters. I've also heard that Twin Peaks closes off with a disappointing, unsatisfying conclusion to its story, although with the teased Alan Wake crossover DLC, I think they're prepping for something much more interesting than what it closed out with. Number 7. Hard-pressed to name another game this year that had me laughing out loud all by my lonesome the way this one did. It's an incredibly sincere and almost childish game that bears the personality and wit of its writer and designer, Grace Bruxner. Now, I hate the way our industry creates auteur game designer celebrities like Hideo Kojima, David Cage, and Tim Schafer. While they all have created prolific games, yes, they were aided by teams of dozens and sometimes hundreds of incredibly talented artists, programmers, and designers. But Frog Detective, I'm quite comfortable saying, is a Grace Bruxner game. Co-developed with Thomas Bowker, of course. Frog Detective is genuinely one of the most endearing, witty, and delightful games I've played in years. While I solved the first case back in 2018, Frog Detective returned this year with a new thriller, The Case of the Invisible Wizard. It's short, about an hour or so to complete, but as I say again and again, games should strive for quality, not quantity. And the hour I spent with Frog Detective Chapter 2 was quality, with a capital Q. Brilliant writing, terrific characters, and a hilarious climax. Frog Detective 2, The Case of the Invisible Wizard applies the old adage, brevity is the soul of wit, to everything but its title. Number 6. Ah, Grindstone, you beautiful bastard of a game. Free from the multiple premium currencies that plague the matching genre, unbound by the level design geared to force players into shelling out cash for progress, untainted by advertisements upon each and every death, you, dear Grindstone, are a beacon of hope in a genre I thought was lost to the freemium marketplace. Only you, dear Grindstone, could provide me with refuge from the droll of day-to-day activities like busing or going to the bathroom. Grindstone, you gorgeous, disgusting game about strategic monster slashing and satisfying skull bashing. I've never put more thought into a loadout in a game, but you, with your simple 3-slot setup and dozens of weapons and armors, provide so many strategic options. I shall sing your praises until the end of time, and I shall not renew my Apple Arcade subscription until your sequel releases. You're a damn fine video game, dear Grindstone. The best mobile game released in 2019. No matter what the Game Awards say.
Goes to Call of Duty Mobile. Congratulations, guys.
Number 5. There's a point in Untitled Goose game where you're instructed to steal a child's glasses. It seemed simple enough, but to acquire this child's glasses, I had to trip him by untying his shoes. And not only did I trip him, but where we were standing, he fell face first into a puddle. Drenched, battered, and now blind, I tormented this child, chasing him into a telephone booth to complete another objective, forcing him to call his mother for help. Then I stole his toy, putting it back on the store shelf so he had to buy it back. This would most definitely be the point in this person's life a therapist 20 years from now will fixate on, drawing all of this person's anxieties and pain and self-doubt back to this one traumatic day a goose fucked up his shit. And that's just one person. Goose fucks up an entire town's shit, and I still don't know why. Why traumatize all these villagers? Why destroy a priceless vase? Why push a bucket onto a man's head? Honk to make someone hit their finger with a hammer? For the fun of it? Is it for the fantasy of ruining the lives of so many people and facing no legal recourse? Is it for the thrill of stealing someone's valuables and hearing the smack smack of my webbed feet as I flee the scene of the crime, just out of arm's reach? Yes, actually, that's exactly why. Number 4. Before someone starts whining, you can't count a DLC as a game of the year, you should know that there's over 40 new levels in Chapter 9, an entirely new original soundtrack composed by IGF award winner Lena Raine. And if you suck as much as I do, roughly 20 hours of new content here. That's enough to be one of those filler in-between AAA games where the publisher considers it low stakes enough to put black people on the cover. Celeste Chapter 9 is aptly named Farewell, as it's a goodbye from the small team of developers bewildered their 2018 platformer touched as many lives as it did, including my own. But it's not a goodbye you can receive unless you truly demonstrate that you know this game as well as they do, that you understand how wave dash chains and almost pixel-perfect jumps are what make this game one of the tightest platforming experiences ever crafted by mortals with computers. If you're persistent enough to perfect every screen, section by section, almost like a pianist, perfecting each bar of a song through repetition, then you will be rewarded. Every time I land at the end of a screen I've spent half an hour rehearsing. It's such an amazing feeling of accomplishment. This chapter is platforming perfection, and with every other screen cleared you'll understand why this is so deserving of its own spot on the list. Number 3. You can't buy a soundtrack for Ape Out. That's because there isn't one. Or rather, no soundtrack composed in the traditional sense. Instead, you are the composer. The ape is your pen, and the stylish environments and vistas of this unsuspecting world are your staff, and the splattering blood of thrown enemies, the ink with which you put the notes down. Every action you take in Ape Out feeds into the game's reactive music system, deploying frantic cymbal clashes and driving drum fills as you ramp up your destruction. At the end of Ape Out, you haven't merely beaten a game, you've composed an entire jazz album wholly unique to your playthrough. Every level a one-of-a-kind recording created by your route to freedom, littered with the percussion, bass, and brass of your warpath. This game doesn't rest on its laurels, although it does feature a gorgeous, scratchy art style and frenetic, exhilarating combat. It instead takes a genre that I've become oh so familiar with this past decade, top-down action arcade games, and strips away everything except the pure, unadulterated core. Ape Out puts the primal power of an ape wronged into your hands and begs you to go apeshit. Number 2.
Check out the loot they left Gibraltar. This is what legends are made of.
Late-stage capitalism is truly a hellscape, with the growing unstable gig economy, rampant wealth inequality, and a laughable housing market, where my landlord thinks a 25% rent increase is, quote, appropriate to meet the demands of the current housing market. But it's also birthed one of the most polished, most perfect FPS experiences I've laid my hands on in Apex Legends, a game I sunk 250 hours into this year, and haven't spent a cent on. That's right, this fantastic game that gave me so much cost me nothing. It gave us the ping system, something I've instinctively tried to do in every multiplayer game I've played since, and been disappointed every time it was absent. The mid-game respawn that lets you be the clutch teammate who brings it back against all odds. Something Fortnite ripped off within weeks, along with the ping system. And who could forget the cast of endearing, hilarious, and at times intimidating characters, whose personalities struck a chord with my friends and I so hard we recite lines to each other, even in other games? If this mecca of diegetic game design served me, subsidized by a microtransaction-fueled marketplace where idiots buy skins for guns they'll forget about in a year, is another symptom of late-stage capitalism? Well damn, maybe all my constant housing anxieties are worth it. Just kidding, they're absolutely not. Nova Scotia, please pass rental control laws soon. I'm so scared. And number 1. The world of A Short Hike is not unlike many games I've played before, with a range of activities and pastimes very obviously riffing on Animal Crossing, a cast of weird and interesting anthropomorphic characters who reminded me very much of the cast of Night in the Woods, and a thematic platforming premise serving as an allegory for personal growth that reminded me oh so much of my favorite game of 2018, Celeste. With that lineup of amazing games to reference, how could I not love A Short Hike? A Short Hike is comfort food, the game. I know that anytime I feel down or need a pick-me-up, this game will be there. This is a game I'll be booting up many times throughout my life to escape the cruel world or to fly around its scenic mountainsides and hang out by its babbling brooks, to fish with my animal friends, dig for treasure, and explore the beaches for shells. A Short Hike is also the game that I think could serve as one of gaming's greatest ambassadors to those uninterested in mainstream genres like shooters or MMOs. This game holds a place on my proverbial shelf where I pull off games to recommend to those in my life who want to get into games but can't master the first-person controls I find intuitive after all these years. A Short Hike earns the top spot on my list by being the very best that games can be, and it's a game that will stand the test of time, looking and feeling just as good and wonderful in 2029 as it did in 2019.
Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you missed my top 10 movies of 2019 video, I'll link to that right here at the end. I want to thank everyone who's been giving me feedback over my last couple videos. I really appreciate it. Shout out to Alex Violette and Tyler Hall. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you everyone else who has been liking, sharing, and watching. And I recently hit 100 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you for that. I'm hoping to do more video content in 2020, not only on my channel, but also over on the CanadianGameDevs.com channel. They're a site I'm a partner with, been making content there since halfway through last year. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope everyone had a great time off, and let's have a great 2020.
You're breathtaking. You're all breathtaking.